Hey everyone, and welcome back to our coverage of the fall game night kit that happened at Millennium Games in Rochester, New York back in October. My name is Tim, and I'll be with you here today for the game. And that is me, Tim, on the left, playing HB, Engineering the Future. And we've got Mike on the right, playing Kate, both with lovely alt-art identities. And so again, we're in the second game of the second round. If you missed the first game, that's up on the channel as well. And so this, I should point out, was right before Data and Destiny came out. So we do not have access to Global Food Initiative. So this is not exactly the deck that's since become popular. Everybody's calling Food Coats, which of course won the World Championship recently. But it is very similar to that, kind of without Global Food. So it's kind of remarkable how big of a difference that one card makes. It's a very similar shell, but having the runner needing to score 4 agendas compared to 3, which in this version of the deck, is such a massive difference. And so that old classic HB opening, Hedge Fund, Install on Ice, and I think I drew a card as well. And so I'm not really afraid of early HQ accesses for Shaper, so I leave that open. Mike Lucky finds up, plays an SMC. So at this point, I'm thinking it's probably prepaid Kate, since we're seeing Lucky Find. But I know Mike too well. He probably wouldn't play such a on-meta deck, so to speak. So we'll see. And so we install an ice, install a card into the remote. Couldn't see what that was. Oh, Collective Consciousness. Okay, this is definitely not prepaid Kate. So Collective Consciousness is a rarely seen card, I guess you could say, that whenever the Corp reses a piece of ice, the runner gets to draw a card. And so we see a toll booth there, which draws him a card, but of course loses 3 credits. And that is early game a very strong, well, it's a strong piece of ice in general, but early game it's very strong against Shaper because they can't self-modifying code into their decoder to break Tolwoosh. And so he's transferring an Adonis off the top, which is sad, but is draining a bunch of his credits. And gets an Astrolabe out early, which is important for this matchup, since a lot of the econ in HB is coming from those Sexbot campaigns. And so the question here is, I'm only on 3 credits, so even if that is an agenda, scoring it out is going to bankrupt me, and then he'll get a bunch of free R&D access. And I know he can't get through Toll Booth with the amount of money he has unless he has a stim hack or something like that. So instead we draw, throw an Ash onto that server, further defending it, and then drop an Ice in front of HQ. And so you can... Oh, there's another Lucky Find. So he's playing a lot of Lucky Find. Okay, so he's a little trying to figure out what credits were. So that is an Architect. Draws him a card, and he does have the money to go fetch his solution. So paying the cash for the SMC, and then I'm guessing grabbing a Mimic or something like that. It would be very unlikely that it's not Mimic. And there is Mimic. Only cost him 2 since he has not installed anything yet, and breaks both subroutines. So 1 card off the top, and it's an agenda, an ABT no less. So this is a little rough. He's kind of set up where he can get into R&D. I'm on no money. I have no way of resing any campaigns at the start of my turn. Although I'm not, at the very least, I'm not flooded. You can see I'm running 2 Biotic Labors, which is another difference between this and some of the other sort of HB Glaciary decks. What I found, at least, is that unless you're running the Food Coats version where you can afford to just throw away agendas, usually you'll want to be able to score at least 1 out of hand, because it gets to the point, especially against runners like Kate, where you just can't keep them out of a remote. You can't make it expensive enough. And so I like running Biotic Labor to try to score 1 of those agendas. And it also gives you a window where if you have Jackson on the table, you can try to Biotic out an ABT and get a bunch of ice on the table. And so crediting up a little bit and running in on HQ, can't res, I'm only on 2 credits. I don't think there's any ice in here that reses for 2 credits. And he sees NAPD, which you have to steal, I would say. And he's sitting at a comfortable 5 credits. I'm only at 2, so things are looking a little dire here. 4 points to 0. And we know that's an Ash over there. So it's getting to be a pretty thick server. Just installing and crediting up a little bit. So that still is a remote he can't get into. and getting to the answer to it would be very expensive. He has drawn into a lot of econ. I think that's 2 sure gambles and 2 lucky finds so far. So debating whether the res is worth it here. At this point, down 4, you probably want to do whatever you can to just keep him out of R&D excesses. Even though, again, it'll probably put me fairly low, since that is one of the... Okay, so no resing. Just trusting the heart of the cards here. And it's nothing, fortunately. Okay. So that is a slight weakness of HB, is that they don't really have the super cheap ice. Like, well, I guess they could potentially have the super cheap ice, but in this version, they're generally not running really cheap ice. Everything's in kind of the at least 3 to 4 range. And so when they're low on credits, you can kind of just check into the ice, as long as you have solutions to Architect, to drain them of their money. And throwing an advancement, that's likely that NAPD that we saw sitting in my hand previously. So that would be a very expensive server for him to crack, so I'm feeling that's pretty safe over that. That's why I threw it in there last turn, because it wasn't very safe in my hand, but it's very safe in the remote. So now Mike is hitting a little bit of a lull. So trying to draw into solutions, and he just got a self-modifying code, which is a nice solution. Ooh, and that is a brain cage, so this is something very different. So brain cage, it gives you a brain damage, but then increases your hand size. So it's a net hand size increase, and it hits a public sympathy out of his hand. So he is going for hand size. So in Shaper, you'd expect Beach Party. It's probably Faust at this point, if he's going to increase his hand that much. Oh, and it was Vitruvius, not the NAPD. And so that gives me a counter on Vitruvius, which will let me get back some econ, since I'm hurting on there a little bit. And with the Biotic Laborers in hand, it lets me play them out and then recur them to Biotic out more things. So, yep, there is Game Day we see, which for 2 clicks lets you draw up to your max hand size. Oh, gets a clone chip out. We see an SM. I think I saw another SMC in hand, so he has access to kind of whatever he needs at this point. And I'm still a bit low on credits. Do have a Vitruvius counter, could potentially grab one of those hedge funds or the Adonis. I don't see any agendas in hand. So, oh, that's right, the NAPD that I kept talking about, he scored, so never mind that. So I could, yeah, likely grab a piece of econ. And then we slap Breaker Bay and that Adonis into the remote. So that's going to give me a pretty nice income. I don't have any agendas in hand that I'm worried about stuffing into that remote in the near time. So I can let Adonis tick down for a while, which will hopefully sustain me through most of the game. And he just runs R&D. So we get a Wall of Static, which draws him a card off Collective Consciousness. Which, of course, also, Collective Consciousness, one of the big reasons it doesn't seem to play is that it takes up 2 memory. So he is at full memory right now with the Astrolabe. So he bounces off of that. It gets him a card draw. And then a couple clicks left. Nope, so no, instead he is using the SMC and searching out. What do we got? What do we got? Ooh, looks like there is Faust. Okay. So he's got... Oh, and he cheated himself out of a credit there. But he's got all of his hand size, or some of his hand size, support up, and ways to draw, and Faust is up. So Mimic takes care of Architect, and Faust takes care of pretty much everything else, except for Turing, of course, which I saw in my hand previously in the game. And so that will hopefully stuff him pretty hard at some point. So Fausting his way through Wall of Static, and it looks like he's thinking about using Faust on Architect as well. Okay, he just pays through and sees 1 card off the top, and it's nothing. So, okay, Power Nap. So that is why he's playing Lucky Finds in all of these doubles. So getting 4 credits off the Power Nap, not bad. And then throwing personal touch on Faust. Okay, so he has Faust at Architect Strength, which is troubling. So resing at Breaker Bay and Adonis. So those other two in there are likely an Ash and a Caprice, or two Ashes. I didn't see what the first card was that went in there. So that will be a very tricky server for him to get into. Even though Faust can get in there, he'll have to pay the toll, and then he'll have to likely beat Caprice, and then Ash on top of that. So icing up R&D, and we see a team sponsorship in hand. So since I'm using Biotic Labor, I like the synergy with team sponsorship, where if you do Biotic something out, especially accelerated beta test, it lets you pull back some of the things you may have beta tested into the trash. So giving Mike a bunch of free cards off that he can then throw away with Faust. So that was team sponsorship and Eve going down. My econ is starting to stabilize a little bit, and I'm not overly flooded, so I could potentially pay the gold price for Eve, and then Adonis, of course, ticking down. So moneying up, playing public support, or public sympathy, and yes, we do res the Eve. And getting money off Adonis. So starting again to stabilize a little bit here. So the game plan right now is to just get money and solidify R&D. Since I do have to run real 3-pointers in this deck because Global Food wasn't released yet, one access can win him the game here. So I really need to shore up R&D. And defending Eve there because he is on the credits to trash, and my econ train is incredibly vital right now. So defending the assets, and yeah, really at this point just waiting for him to exhaust some of his resources. Thinking about what to do here, and it looks like throwing another Eli on that server because that is going to be my scoring server once Adonis ticks down. And it's game day. So he draws 8 cards here, going up to his hand size of 9. So pretty good value. And that turns Faust immediately back on. So that was clicks 1 and 2 were game day. And he indexes for click 3. But fortunately, we've got Mr. Turing sitting in R&D, which completely hoses. He could, at this point, if he has a decoder, he could clone chip onto an SMC, which it looks like that's what he's doing. He'll have to get rid of Collective Consciousness. What's he going for with SMC? He's Kate. It'll probably be Cyber Cipher or Gordian Blade, I would guess, at this point. And since it's on a central, it's only 2 strength, so it doesn't... Oh. And it seems his decoder is in his hand. So we're going to rewind this a little bit. It's a casual level event, so this is all A-OK. So we rewind back to him hitting Turing with the board state as it was, and we think about what to do. So he just bangs off with the indexing. And so for click 4, so he plays the Gordian Blade that was sitting in hand, which is unfortunate. And he keeps his memory intact. So click 4 is getting the Gordian Blade. So he now has the means to get into R&D. And so econ continues to tick down. And drawing up. So it looks like maybe one agenda in hand. It's tough to see. And I'm drawing in. So I had Viper in the deck at this point too, which I was not super impressed with on the day because of the existence of Ottman. There was a lot of Valencia at this tournament, not the DLR Valencia spam kind of thing, but more of the Ottman-based Valencia that uses Desperado. And so Viper just got Ottman the entire day. So that is something I definitely would have changed about the deck. Oh, and power napping again for maximum value. So there's a bunch of power naps, some game days, some lucky finds in there. So that is fairly potent, up to 12 credits. And that is the thing, like the doubles you're playing in this deck to turn on Power Nap are pretty good in their own right. It's not like when the card was released where the doubles weren't all that great and you were like had to stuff a bunch of garbage into your deck to turn it on. Especially in this style of deck where you want to draw up big with Game Day and Lucky Find is just good. Power Nap, I think, becomes a pretty strong card. So we see E3 and R&D interface coming in. So Faust plus E3 means you can get through things pretty efficiently. And R&D interface is terrifying at this point because, again, a single three-pointer score for him is the end of the game. So at this point, I'm actually looking for agendas, I believe, because that server is so strong, because I have Breaker Bay in there, and I install and advance there. I think that was that priority requisition that I just slapped in there because, again, it's much safer in that server than it is in HQ. And he saw me draw quite a bit, so 8 and HQ run would have been incentivized. And so I let him trash Jackson there, which was slightly off screen, just to waste some money because I really just want to drain his money so that he can't get into my scoring server. Because, again, he's going to have to go through the toll booth, Ash, Caprice, etc. And so getting some money off of Eve. And so I think we've got a pretty neat little play incoming here. So from what I can tell, it doesn't matter if he has access to Clot because I played it last turn. And we are looking at team sponsorship and an advanced card, checking that the timing works out, which it does. So it looks like we are biotic laboring. Ooh. I'm debating this because this will be fairly expensive, but what it'll let me do is trigger the priority rec and the team sponsorship, so I'll be able to take a piece of ice from my hand or archives and put it in for free. So that's the play that I'm teeing up here. So we play Biotic Labor, advance 4 times. And then I also res team sponsorship, so you don't want to wreck the timing here at the last minute. So resing team sponsorship, we score priority requisition. Team sponsorship lets me install. So they both team sponsorship and priority rec say when you score. So I trigger team sponsorship first. And it also, team sponsorship lets you ignore costs on the install. So I take a piece of ice out of my hand and install it up on the stack on R&D. And then trigger priority requisition to res it. And then I also get a credit because I'm HB engineering the future. So, pretty strong play, I guess. But that was, I'm running Heimdall 2 in this deck. I think that's something that a lot of people have taken out. But since I did have priority requisition in there, again, because global food didn't exist, I think having 1 or 2 big pieces of ice like that is nice. And so the game is entirely in R&D at this point. I have another Biotic Labor in hand, and I only need to score 2 points. So I just have to defend R&D like crazy. And so he can click through Heimdall, so he can, once a turn, get into R&D. So if he has a big multi-access, he does have R&D interface, likely has... We saw him playing indexing, so maybe he doesn't have Maker's Eye. So at this point, I'm just trying to draw into agendas. I just need that last 2-pointer that I can Biotic Labor out. And so I need to stay at 6 credits, which for HB is enough to Biotic Labor a 2-pointer. And he doesn't have any way on table of getting to a Clot. And again, based on what his influence is and what his deck is doing, I don't think Clot is all that likely. And so Faust is sitting at enormous strength right now. So he can get through pretty much any one of my pieces of ice, except for Heimdall 2 for a card and a credit. But again, he's getting very low in his deck, so Faust isn't quite as strong, unless, of course, he has Levy that he's went into play. And so still not seeing any agendas. And that's a Caprice there, which at this point probably goes on R&D. Yep, there it goes. Throwing Caprice in R&D, so if he gets his way all the way through that pile of hell, he still hits Caprice at the bottom of it. So really just want to defend and wait. This is kind of that old style. I used to play a lot of HB Fast Advance when the game first came out, and that was what it felt like you did the entire game: is gain money, wait to draw an agenda or a biotic labor, and then score. And so throwing another toll booth, which again just makes that server expensive for him to get into. He'll be able to break it with Faust, but paying 2 tolls and then all of the upgrades. If I need to score out of there, like if I draw my other 3-pointer, I can do so. So Mike is sitting on 7 credits. He's got a pretty healthy hand right now. So Faust could do a lot of work. And he could potentially click through Heimdall, so he could take a big shot at R&D and likely win the game, because we're seeing, 9 of the 20 points in the deck are on the board. I don't have any in my hand. So we know the other 11 points are in my deck, and we've gone through a lot of the deck at this point. So R&D is pretty full of agendas. Okay, going for it. So Faust is sitting at 5, so goes up to 7, breaks, and E3s through the other 2. And then we get a Viper, which draws him a card off Collective Consciousness. And that's at Strength 4, where Faust is at 5, so he could discard a card and a credit, and then a credit through Turing. Yep. So it hits Turing, pays a buck. Wall of Stanek is a card. And then Architect is either... Okay, so I res Caprice when he hits Architect. So either has to pay 2 credits, in which case I win the Caprice, so he has to pay cards through at this point. And then we do the Caprice thing. And he has $3. I know there are 2 NAPDs left in the deck, so I'm not super scared. But again, if he hits the other 3-pointer in there, it's just game over. So what are we betting here? I go with 2, he goes with 0, and he bounces off. So he lived to fight another day. That does put me below the threshold for bioticking out something. If I draw an agenda here, that would actually be really bad. And he does run HQ, thinking that there must be something in there at some point, right? And instead sees Eli. At this point, though, he is, unless he has access to Levy somewhere, he's in a bit of trouble. He's burned through almost the entirety of his deck. I think there's something like 3 or 4 cards left, and then what's in his hand. So he won't be able to do another Faust run through like he just did on R&D, especially if it's just to hit Caprice. So we see an Adonis there, which I will likely throw in that remote, since I'm hoping to score out of hand at this point. And it also does force him to have to go in there. And I draw and take a credit. So that draw was a little risky there. Not exactly sure why I did that, because I could have just drawn into an agenda, and he can just hammer HQ until he hits it. And I probably could have bluffed that out as an agenda a little better by maybe just taking a credit. So yeah, it looks like 2 cards left in Mike's deck. So he's running, because he has to respect that that may be an agenda. It's a toll booth, so that's not happening. And the middle piece, I believe, is Eli. And it looks like I don't res the Eli, because, again, he has to pay the toll. And res an Ash for free off the Breaker Bay, so he can't match the Trace, and he also can't trash Ash, so Ash just sits there. And that's all he can access. So at this point, he probably has to just Hail Mary at HQ and hope there's something in there, because he's thinking, that's the game-winning agenda, I can't get it. Yep, so going for HQ. I know there's nothing in there, so I don't bother resing the ice. I'm not afraid of potential things he could do out of HQ, although he could have Escher or something like that, which would be actually not all that terrible, because my ice is pretty strong right now. So yeah, just hammering HQ and hoping that the agenda is in there, because I don't think there's any way he can get into R&D again at this point. And so we just get the free Adonis res. Eve ticks all the way down, so full Eve. Huzzah. And then we hope we draw the agenda, and we did. So that is going to be game. And again, he has... Oh, I don't just Biotic it out. That's surprising. I thought I had Biotic in hand, and I'm pretty sure that was Vitruvius that I drew. Huh. Not sure. Something must be different than I'm thinking here. I thought I saw that I had Biotic Labor in hand and just drew Vitruvius and had enough credits to score. And I don't think he has any way to get Clot, unless it went into his archives early and I missed it. So I'm not quite sure what happened there. But again, he has no, unless he has Stim Hack or anything like that, he has no real way of getting into that server either. So I suppose it's safe there, but I could have finished the game. Yeah, I don't know why I did that. Okay, we get to see his heap here. Oh, there is a Clot in there. Okay, that explains things. So there was a Clot in there. I missed that discard early in the game. So I can't just Biotic out the Vitruvius. So I do have to score it the real way. But again, there's a toll booth on the front of that server. There's a toll booth in the back. And there's Ash and some other upgrade, which I'm guessing is either another Ash or a Caprice at this point. So we'd have to get in multiple times. So we would have to have, I guess, recurring, some way to play multiple Stim Hacks or something like that to get into that server. So it is pretty safe. So Mike is deep in the tank here, trying to figure out if there is a way you can go for the game. Again, it's only going to take a single score somewhere for him to win the game potentially. But it's also one score for me as well to win the game. So he has to try to figure out the one server that could potentially get him the game. So he draws for one, likely trying to figure out if there's a way he can get into R&D, because that'll give him, if he can get in, maintain 2 credits, and beat Caprice, he could potentially... Okay, so that is what he's going for. Okay, he clicks through Heimdall 2, takes the brain damage. We hit a Deus Ex. And he's breaking everything, getting all the way through. So dumps all of his cards. He's on 1 credit. He's letting Architect fire. It's his last click, I believe. So if it was anything that mattered, I could install it. So installing Jackson, the top card is not an agenda, so we're okay. I spend the 2 on Caprice to deny him, and then score the Vitruvius out of there. So that was another Ash. The bottom card was Caprice, so that was, an incredibly secure server. And so that's the game. I just was able to recover from what looked like a disastrous early game for Mike. That team sponsorship, team sponsorship priority wrecking the Heimdall 2 likely won me the game there because it made R&D just way too expensive to get into. Because he had access to indexing, so he could have really pounded R&D, but was able to turn that off. So I go 2-0 in that round, and we will be moving on to the next round. We've got 4 rounds of Swiss, so we'll have another couple rounds worth of games for you in just a little bit. So thanks for watching, everybody, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.